everyone, welcome back. Before we get into the stories, I need to give a disclaimer for stories number 1 and 2, as in both stories there's sexual harassment, so if you don't want to hear stories like that, now you know. And before we get into the stories, remember, if you ever want to share your story with me personally, you can send it at southerncannibal.com. I haven't done any emergency worker type stories in quite a while, like with EMTs, paramedics, police officers, stuff like that. So if you have a brutal story that's anything like that, please send it my way. But without any more further interruptions, let's go ahead and get into today's stories. And remember to always stay hungry. I'm a 23-year-old female from the UK. When I was 18, I lived very close to a Starbucks coffee shop. It was only about 15 minutes away on foot. During this time, I had pretty bad anxiety issues due to trauma, and part of my therapy treatment was to go out for walks on my own when it was a little dark outside. I wouldn't put myself in dangerous situations or do anything stupid, but I had to get over my irrational fear of being alone outside at night. It's important to note that the story takes place when it was about 9 p.m. in the late summer months. I can't really remember if it was July or August, but it was right around that time. I guess around the time it is now. It didn't get dark until about 10:30 to 11 p.m. Anyway, the Starbucks closed at 8 p.m., and right behind it where the car park was, there was a small hotel and a gas station next to it. There was also a gas station across the street which sort of rivaled the other one. This is relevant to the story. I don't want to name the hotel or gas stations for privacy reasons, just in case someone could sleuth and figure out where this took place. I was out for a walk, and I wanted to challenge myself to stay out until at least 9:30 p.m., then I'd walk home. I don't have a lot of mobile data on my phone, but the Starbucks provided free Wi-Fi even when closed. So I ended up in one of the seating areas outside so that I could scroll through social media on my phone, and it made me feel calmer since I felt apprehensive about being out at night on my own. I sat there for a while, just minding my own business. Now, the car park was deserted. The gas station was close by and obviously had cars pulling in and out, but the customers over there couldn't see me because of the layout of everything around me. I was on my phone when suddenly I heard a loud shouting coming from the hotel. I looked up, and it was like my brain couldn't comprehend what was happening, because I sat there frozen as I watched 2 older men hanging out their window shouting at me. It took me a second to understand what the hell was happening, and I was horrified. They were screaming at me, trying to get my attention, saying things like,
"Hey! Why don't you come over here, baby?"
Like I said, I have major anxiety issues about being out at night, especially on my own, and I was really trying to resolve those issues. I was so scared that I immediately grabbed my rucksack and got up, not even tucking the chair back into the table that I'd sat at, and I started speed walking out of the car park towards the gas station. One of the men disappeared, and the other screamed at me,
"Hey, you fucking bitch! You need to come up to our room!"
After hearing this, my heart was pounding. I immediately called a family member, and I was almost crying from fear. I was only 18 years old. Yes, I was considered an adult in my country, but I still felt like a dumb teenager in a lot of ways. As a female, being accosted by these men who were insulting me, and then demanding I come up to their room, well, I just knew they clearly had very bad intentions. I didn't go into the gas station because I felt unsafe, and I decided to cross the street to the other side and then go into the station over there instead. This is because my mom actually worked there, and I felt much safer going to her, where I knew she and her colleagues could protect me. The relative I was on the phone with told me to call the police, but I was way too afraid to hang up the phone, and I begged her to stay on the line with me. She agreed and tried to calm me down, telling me to go across the street. When I was crossing, I looked behind me, and the men were now fucking following me. I couldn't believe what was happening. They looked to be in their late 20s, early 30s, and I definitely looked my age, if not younger. I took off running, not even caring if I got hit by a car, because I just knew I had to get the fuck away from them. I didn't dare look behind me, just in case they were running after me. I flew into the gas station and immediately ran to the cash register, and I then told my mom what was happening. One of the people working with her that night was a man who I'll call Jason. Jason was really stocky and tall, built like a tank, as it's commonly called in my country. My mom ushered me into the bathroom and told me to stay there and lock the door. Jason heard everything, and he ran out the door and into the forecourt to find the men. I was crying in relief now because I finally felt safe. My mom and a lady she worked with had tried to comfort me. Jason came back in after a few minutes, and he said the men had ran away as soon as they saw him coming. I really don't know what those men intended to do. Following me into a place people would see them seems really stupid on their part, but I know they had very bad intentions. Jason walked my mom and I home, and we never saw the men again. I assumed they just went back to the hotel. After that experience, I didn't want it to be a setback, so a week later, I walked back to that Starbucks at 9 p.m. and stood looking at the hotel. I knew that the men would have likely moved on by that point, and I needed to do that to prove to myself that I would be okay. I've dealt with my anxiety issues now, and I'm glad this experience didn't make it worse for me. It was really terrifying at the time, and I still think about it sometimes. I just know they had something horrific planned for me. I wonder just how long they watched me sitting on my phone. I'm now always aware of my surroundings, and I never get so immersed in anything that I lose sight of those around me. For all I know, they could have watched me the whole time. They could have snuck up on me, grabbed me, and done God knows what. I was really lucky they were dumbasses and decided to scream at me instead. Please stay safe, everyone, and don't make the same mistake I did. Always be aware of your surroundings, and if you find yourself in a scary situation, don't panic. Go to somewhere safe and call the police. You never know where the predators are lurking. For context, I'm a 17-year-old female. A lot of adults assume I'm in my 20s, due to me being more independent than most around my age. Plus, I have a pretty noticeable tattoo on my right arm. I was wanting to get a second job for summer break due to me being in debt to my dad. He replaced the transmission in my car, and I wanted to pay him back pretty quickly because I knew that he was running low on money. The first story is not super important to the main story, but it was one of the reasons why I quit, so I'm including it. I submitted a job application to pump gas at a gas station that a family member of mine owned. I got the job, and I came in for training twice. The first day went by great, nothing out of the ordinary. Second training day rolls by, and it's near the end of my day, and a car full of young teenage boys pulled up to one of the pumps. I walked over and I asked how much they wanted, while I took the card out of this boy's hand. Mind you, his car was packed with what I'm assuming were 15 to 17-year-old boys, and the passenger of the car was then telling me things like,
"Damn, girl, your ass is so fat. Look at those thighs."
I then got the pump going, and I handed the card back to the driver. I leaned into the driver's window a bit, and then said nicely, "You better watch out. My boyfriend's sitting right there," while pointing to him. My boyfriend started walking over to me due to me pointing at him, and the passenger then goes,
"Man, you're so lucky."
Mind you, my boyfriend isn't very tall. He stands at 5'8", but he's built enough to look threatening. He looked at me, and the boys confused. I said to the whole group of boys, "Well, if my ass is so fat, can I get a tip?" They ended up giving me a slice of Little Caesars pizza. I didn't really want any, but I thought it would be funny to take a slice. I then told my coworker, I just hustled some dumbass boys out of a piece of pizza. I didn't eat the pizza, and I ended up giving the slice to a buddy of mine who had stopped by. I explained to my boyfriend and buddy who showed up right after they left what happened. We all just laughed it off, and it really wasn't that scary to me. I ended up going to bed that night replaying that whole incident in my head. I was honestly confused on why they even did that in the first place. Was it a dare? Did they just want to mess with me just because? Or was that boy really trying to flirt with me? I had no idea, and I still think about it every now and then. But that was only the tip of the iceberg. It was my very first day running the whole gas station by myself. I started in the mornings on weekends, so I wasn't really expecting anything major or weird to happen like the day before. The day was going well. One guy got a bit upset that he didn't have any gas rewards left, but that was to be expected. I'm gonna say it was about 11 in the afternoon. I was 4 hours away from being done with my first day at the station. I was sitting in my little hut when an 80s white van then pulled up. I walked up to the window, and an old man who was probably in his 70s shakily handed me his debit card. This man definitely looked like he was on some sort of list, if you get what I'm saying. I asked him how much he wanted. He mumbled, and I asked him again, and this time he mumbled again. $20. I saw something smoking, kind of like a cigarette inside or something. I just assumed the guy was stoned, and that was why he was acting a bit strange. I ran his card, but the pump didn't like the card. So I ended up just approving the pump, forgetting to run his card inside like an idiot. I literally gave this guy free gas without even noticing it. After it was done, I was about to ask if he wanted a receipt, but he mumbled again, so I got closer to the van. I noticed the cigarette in his hand, which made me concerned. He then goes, "So what time do you get off?" Red flag. Alarm bells are totally going off inside my head. I thought quick on my feet. Oh, I get off at 4. When in reality, I got off at 3. He leans in towards me a bit, and then says, "I'll be back for you." Then he drove off. That's what freaked me out. I went inside my hut, and I called my boyfriend immediately, and I told him to come down when he could. At the time of this, he was helping a family member of mine build their house. So about an hour passes, and I then see a cop pull up to a pump. This gas station is only about 3 blocks away from the police station, so officers would often come here to fill up. It was a female sheriff. I contemplated if I should even mention it to her. I then sprung out of my seat and knocked on her window. I explained what happened, and she told me she would send an officer right at 3, just in case he came by again. I'm now an hour away from my shift being over, and I'm praying to God that I don't see that man again. My boyfriend pulls up and stands close to me while I'm running to different cars. This time, however, a red van pulls in. I'm going to just assume it was an early 2000s Dodge van. My heart sank when I then saw that it was the same man as before. I just acted like nothing happened, and I asked him how much gas he wanted. At this time, I realized that I'd gave him free gas earlier, and I made sure to run his card multiple times at the pump. It wasn't working, so I told him I was going to have to run it inside. It still didn't go through though. Yeah, this guy definitely didn't have any money on his card. I told him that his card was declined, and I ran to the next car that pulled up before he could say anything. I notified my boyfriend that it was the same man. The man just sat there for a minute, then decided to drive to the other side of the station and park. A lifted Dodge Cummins pulled up, and me and my boyfriend were talking to him about the creepy ass guy. I also called my boss and explained the situation to her as well, and she came down to the station. Honestly, I really feel like I shouldn't have called her. She didn't really help my situation at all. My shift was pretty much over at this point, and my other female coworker was pulling into the lot. She parked right next to him. My boss ran over to tell her to move her car ASAP. She then told the creepy man that he can't park there due to having large trucks come through all the time. Seriously? You couldn't have just told him if he didn't leave she would call the police? Anyways, the creepy guy tried to explain how he was waiting for my female coworker to come. He did end up leaving, and my boss then told me what she said. I was trying really hard not to cry when a police officer showed up, which really made me regret calling my boss because the man would have had to come face to face with what he did. I talked to my coworker, and my coworker would tell me then he would act weird towards her, but he never tried to follow her home or anything like that. But when I got home, I couldn't stop crying. I was so scared that I was going to see that same man yet again due to me working the next day. I texted my boss last minute, and I told her I couldn't come in because of how scared I was. I ended up coming by the following weekend, telling her I wanted to quit. She assumed that I had quit over text and was already training someone new for my position. It was actually one of my friends, which honestly worked out perfectly because he was perfect for the job. He's a big guy, and he doesn't take shit from anyone, so I knew that they picked someone good to replace me. I gave my boss the keys for the office/hut and my uniform. Whenever I thought about this, I would often get mad at myself for not being more aggressive towards that man. Instead, I just froze up. I was also mad due to my boyfriend not even getting mad at the man. But my boyfriend wouldn't hurt a fly. He wouldn't have interfered unless he really had to. I'm really glad he was there and came in just in time that the man came back. All of this happened about a month ago. I don't get mad or upset at myself or my boyfriend about what happened anymore, but I literally got sexually harassed 2 of the 3 days that I was there. One even being one of my training days. If you're a female, I really don't recommend working at a gas station unless you're around others. To the man that tried to follow me home or do God knows what to me, fuck you. God only knows what I'll do if I ever see that same man again. Be safe out there, everyone. Listening to these stories has really helped me identify those red flags. If this had happened 2 years ago, I never would have noticed. This happened to me when I was 19. For some context, I'm a guy. I was working at my overnight job at a 24-hour gas station, and it was about 1 in the morning, and I was just sitting at the register minding my own business when this guy walks in. He approached the counter, and he had asked for a guy that he knows. Keep in mind, I know that guy as well. I know the guy that came up to the counter is a former classmate that I graduated with, and I told him the guy he was asking for wasn't there. He said that I was lying. Then he took out a gun and pointed it right at me. He then told me to tell him where he's at or he's opening fire. I once again told him that he wasn't here. Then he actually came behind the counter and put the gun right up to my head, then saying,
"All right, this is the last chance, motherfucker. Tell me where he is or you die."
Also, keep in mind that the guy who had the gun to my head was someone from school that everyone couldn't stand. I was just frozen. I didn't know what to do. I told him for the 3rd time that he wasn't here and that I don't know where the hell he's at. My heart was racing to what felt like 1,000,000 miles a second. Then thankfully, a cop walked inside the gas station surprisingly and then screamed at the guy to drop the gun and step away with his hands up. The guy was arrested. After this happened, I immediately ran to the bathroom to take the biggest shit I probably ever have in my life. I was actually so scared I literally ended up shitting out my guts. I know that's not the point, but I felt such relief after it was all over. After I finished up in the bathroom, I went to the counter and I thanked the officer for taking care of that guy. My boss saw how scared I was, and they said I could leave for the night if I wanted to for my safety. So that's what I did. I clocked out, and I then went home safe and sound. I quit that job the very next day. I told the guy from school about our classmate with the gun and what happened. He was really glad that I didn't tell him where he was, because apparently they had some really bad blood. Needless to say, I'm never working overnights again. Hey everyone, I hope you all enjoyed these stories. If you ever want to submit your own, you can do so at southerncannibal.com. Have a good night, everyone. And remember to always stay